Detroit, we need to talk. Because something strange happened at Lions training camp this week, and if you blinked, you might have missed it. But trust me, this one matters. The Lions just shuffled their entire offensive line in the middle of a training camp practice, and it's got fans scratching their heads wondering if we're watching a rerun of last summer. Grab a seat, because we're breaking down the center controversy, the advanced stats nobody's talking about, and a running back who might have just saved Detroit's backfield. Welcome back to Detroit's Scope. Let's set the scene. It's a rain-soaked practice at Allen Park, and starting center Juice Scruggs is finally back in pads for the first time all camp after working his way back from a soft-tissue groin injury. That alone should have been the headline. Instead, the story became about who was replacing him every time he needed a breather. Because when Scruggs jogged to the sideline midway through team drills, the Lions didn't just plug in a backup. They pulled right guard Tate Ratledge. Yes, the same Tate Ratledge who spent all last summer being talked about as a potential center convert, and slid him under center with the first-team offense. Now here's where it gets interesting, and here's where a little context makes this whole thing make a lot more sense. This isn't just some random experiment Dan Campbell dreamed up out of boredom. The real domino behind all of this goes back to an injury that rocked Detroit's offensive line plans before camp even got rolling. Cade Mays, the free agent big money center Detroit brought in this offseason specifically to anchor that interior line, went down with a fractured wrist and is expected to miss 8 to 10 weeks, which realistically puts his return somewhere around October. That single injury blew up the Lions' tidy little center plan and forced this entire competition into existence. Suddenly Detroit needed answers, and fast, because you cannot walk into week 1 against the Saints without knowing who's snapping the football to Jared Goff. So who stepped up first? Not Ratledge. It was actually undrafted lineman Seth McLaughlin, who took over first-team center representatives while both Scruggs and Mays were sidelined. And by all accounts, he didn't just survive, he impressed. McLaughlin started the preseason opener against Cincinnati at center and reportedly played well enough that Dan Campbell started talking him up in press conferences, praising his quickness and his ability to play low to the ground even without elite size. That's the quiet subplot fueling this whole center saga. It's not just Scruggs versus Ratledge. There's a third name in that room, and McLaughlin has forced his way into the conversation whether the fan base realized it or not. But let's get back to Ratledge, because that's the move that had everybody doing a double take. When he stepped in at center, the Lions didn't just leave a hole at right guard. They shifted Christian Mahogany over from left guard to right guard, and brought in Ben Barch, finally healthy, to handle left guard. 3 players, 2 positions, 1 giant chess match happening in real time on a rainy practice field. And the results were exactly what you'd expect from a first-time crossover experiment in the rain. Ratledge had multiple botched snaps. Reports from the ground pegged it as at least 2, maybe more depending on who you ask, and honestly some of that can be chalked up to the wet football and Jared Goff's cadence timing rather than Ratledge simply being bad at the job. Still, when the offensive line went from Scruggs at center to Ratledge at center, beat writers on the ground described the unit as noticeably more vulnerable against blitz pressure, less cohesive, and clearly still finding its rhythm. Here's the thing that makes this so fascinating from a roster-building perspective. On paper, sliding your 5 most talented linemen onto the field together sounds like a genius move. Ratledge at center, Mahogany at right guard, Barch at left guard. That combination, in theory, features some of Detroit's most physically gifted players in the building. But football isn't chess. It's not just about raw talent sitting in the right squares. It's about chemistry, timing, and a quarterback who needs to trust that the ball is going to be in his hands at the exact moment he expects it. And that's exactly the tension Dan Campbell is wrestling with right now. Do you sacrifice a season's worth of built-in cohesion between your starting 5 just to squeeze marginally more talent onto the field? Or do you stick with continuity even if it means a slightly less flashy starting lineup? Campbell himself has been fairly transparent about what this is really about. He's called it exactly what it looks like: insurance. In his words, Ratledge is being cross-trained at center because the Lions need to know that if something goes wrong up front during the season, they have a plan B who's already comfortable making those calls and taking those snaps. It's not necessarily a full-blown quarterback controversy at center. It's a team that got burned by an injury to their prized free agent addition and is refusing to get caught flat-footed twice. Multiple reporters on the beat have echoed that same read, framing Scruggs as the current favorite to lock down the Week 1 job, with Ratledge working in his trusted depth rather than a legitimate threat to steal the position outright. Still, you can't blame Lions fans for getting a little nervous watching this unfold. Detroit tried this exact experiment with Ratledge at center last summer, and it didn't last. It got scrapped fast, and he went right back to right guard, which is clearly the more natural fit for a player who's still just entering year 2 in this league. asking a young lineman to simultaneously develop his technique at guard while also learning the mental gymnastics of center, the protection calls, the shotgun snaps, the responsibility of essentially quarterbacking the offensive line, is a lot to load onto one guy's plate during a stretch of camp that's supposed to be about building continuity with his actual starting running mate, rookie right tackle Blake Miller. That pairing matters. Mahogany and Miller need representatives together. Every practice Ratledge spends at center instead of next to Miller is technically a rep that pairing doesn't get to build. So buckle up, because this center competition is not going away anytime soon. And if you're the kind of fan who wants every single practice update the moment it happens, this is exactly why you need to be subscribed to Detroit Scope. We are closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and every single person hitting that button gets us one step closer. So if you haven't already, now's the time. Now let's pivot. Because the offensive line wasn't the only story to come out of camp. If you want a genuinely feel-good storyline, look no further than Alim McNeill. After working his way back from injury, McNeill didn't just look good in Detroit's preseason opener against Cincinnati. The advanced numbers backed it up in a big way. According to Pro Football Focus, McNeill posted a pass rush productivity grade that ranked second highest among more than 100 qualifying defenders league-wide with at least 9 pass rush snaps. He racked up 5 pressures across just 21 pass rushing snaps, which works out to a pressure rate creeping toward 25%, and that includes 2 sacks and a forced fumble against the Bengals. That's not a good stat line. That's a dominant one. Now, the obvious caveat here is that Cincinnati's offensive line was genuinely one of the league's weaker units last season, so McNeill wasn't exactly going up against a murderer's row of blockers. But you can only beat what's in front of you, and looking explosive coming off an injury is exactly the kind of sign Lions fans wanted to see. The real test comes when he lines up against a legitimate starting front, but for now, consider this a green light on his recovery. Then there's a battle brewing at cornerback that most people slept on entirely. Roger McCreary, the veteran the Lions brought in and who's been squarely on the roster bubble, saw extremely limited playing time in the preseason opener, almost exclusively in the second half, which is not typically where you want to see a proven veteran stuck. That usage alone sent a message. But when he was actually out there, McCreary balled out. He posted an 82.1 run defense grade and an even more impressive 86.3 coverage grade from Pro Football Focus, allowing 0 completions on 2 targets thrown his way. The problem for McCreary is that rookie corner Keith Abney put up nearly identical run defense numbers, an 81.9 grade, in far less celebrated circumstances. When a 5th-round rookie is matching your production snap for snap, that's not a comfortable place to be if you're a veteran trying to lock down a roster spot. This cornerback room is deeper and more competitive than most people gave it credit for entering camp, and it's entirely possible McCreary's spot on this roster is not as safe as his experience alone would suggest. Last but absolutely not least, running back Jacob Saylors deserves a real moment here, because what he showed in the preseason opener was borderline shocking. Dan Campbell came out after the game and called him the most potent player on Detroit's offense that night, praising him as a steady workhorse who made plays all over the field. The tape backed that up. Saylors posted 6.38 yards after contact per attempt, a number that jumps off the page for a depth back trying to carve out a role. Last year, the read on Saylors was that he ran hard but simply lacked the burst and top-end speed to be more than a camp body. This year, that burst is suddenly there, and it showed up even against Cincinnati's first-team defense. If Detroit's backfield situation gets shaky behind Jahmyr Gibbs at any point this season, Saylors just made a very loud case that he deserves to be the first name called off the bench. So there you have it. A center competition born out of an unlucky injury to Cade Mays, a defensive tackle stat line that has fans buzzing about a bounce-back season, a cornerback room that's more crowded than anyone expected, and a running back who might have quietly saved Detroit's third-string backfield spot. Training camp football is a strange, unpredictable beast, and this week proved it once again. What's your take? Are you comfortable with Tate Ratledge as center insurance, or should Detroit just hand that job to Juice Scruggs and let Ratledge focus on right guard? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because we read every single one. And if this video kept you in the loop on everything Lions, do us a favor. Like it, comment your predictions, and subscribe to Detroit Scope. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and we cannot get there without you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.